week I'm starting another big mosaic. I haven't done one in a hot second. It's gonna be 4 foot by 4 foot. This is gonna be a white oak one with a beautiful logo on it. I'm very excited. Let's figure out a pattern. Y'all ask that a lot too. How do I figure out my patterns? I just kind of like blow and go, you know, like figure it out on the go. I'm gonna make a cross section, so I have a 90-degree 4 quadrants on this thing, and we're just gonna start doing, you know? The backer that I'm using here is 1/2 birch plywood that I get at Home Depot. The first thing that I do is draw the quadrant on the backer so I have clear 45-degree angles and lines that I know to follow to keep everything nice and concise and straight throughout the whole pattern. This also gives me the center of the board, which is the middle of the 2 crosshairs, so I know that's where I want to start my design at. I'm not going to show every single piece that I cut down, but first I cut them on my table saw to the thickness that I want. Now I'm going to be cutting them into the thinner strips, or I'll leave them the same thickness here. That way I have 2 different size variants, which will help give some dimension to my design. I've really been liking using 1 inch, and I think it comes out to about 1/4 inch for my 2 sizes, but you can choose any size that you would like based on the size of your backer. If it's larger, you might want larger pieces, smaller pieces. The smaller you go, the more intricate your design will be, and larger vice versa, the less intricate your design will be. If I'm just cutting the thickness of the slats, I usually start a little bit higher than 1/4 inch thick because I know that I'm going to run it through the planer. That way everything is perfectly the same height. The next step is I run everything through the router table. All of the sides of every single slat, I run it through a 1/4 inch roundover bit. That way it gives it a little chamfered edge and some dimension between each of the slats that it's sitting next to. I have a full in-depth tutorial video on exactly how I make the mosaic that I can insert here, but this is just going to give a general idea. I don't usually have a pattern that I know exactly what I want to do, but I've done enough where I can kind of work quickly. I will try to come up with new designs and new patterns, so I'm not making the exact same sign every time, but I just cut things different sizes. I usually almost always use a 45-degree angle, but you can just play around with the pattern and make sure that you are mirroring it on the other side and have fun creating your little heart out. I use Titebond wood glue, the green one, and I will pin nail not every single piece. I will do the ones to hold them securely in place so the wood will dry. Sometimes it's just maybe the last one on the edge or something. I don't pin nail every single one of them, but for the most part I do them just to keep it sturdy, especially if I want to go ahead and cut off the excess that same day. I want to make sure that the pieces are held down and aren't moving around. I'm a literal genius. Why I didn't think about that before knocks me down a couple points. Otherwise, genius. This side in particular is cut at 45-degree angles. That is the one that I like to stick with. It's the easiest to do, the easiest to plan out the patterns. Every once in a while, I'll play around with a 30 and 60-degree pattern, but the 45-degree is easiest, especially for the beginners. I've learned to work in small sections. There was a time that I cut the entire mosaic and tried to glue up at the same time, and that was just a nightmare. So even within the quadrants, I'll work in small sections. I'll go ahead and round over the mitered edge, the 45-degree edge, and I will glue it in place. And doing it that way will keep my mosaic a lot more tight and secure. I will fill in the nails depending on the type of wood. I've been doing this a little bit differently. For white oak, I'm going to go ahead and use the natural wood filler that you can get at Home Depot. If you're using a darker wood, I will do the glue in the hole with the sawdust method, but I've learned on white oak sometimes it will leave that pin nail a little bit darker and you're able to see it, where the natural wood filler is not doing that. And next I want to cut the edges off that's hanging off the board. I personally like to do this with my jigsaw. Some people will use their router bit, whichever way works best for you, but I like the jigsaw. It's easy to get out, it's easy to cut with. I don't have to fiddle with the router, which is my most scariest tool. I don't like the fact that I'm holding this fast spinning bit that could just like fly and do whatever it wants. I just don't like it personally. Sometimes it can create a more clean cut, but I'm gonna put that dado border on the side, and if I have any messes up, then the border's gonna cover it up. You want to sand everything down nice and smooth, make sure there's no rough edges. But then one of my favorite parts of the hardwood, especially using white oak with its beautiful grain, is you take a wire brush and you're going to scratch up and open up that grain again. That way, if you're gonna stain it, or even if you're gonna leave it raw, it will open up those grain fibers and make it just look so beautiful. I learned this in many of my knowledge from Lizzie at the House of Timber. Highly recommend following her as well. I'm using a white oak here from the frame, and the way that I plan out the size of my frame is I know I want 1/8 inch thickness on the underside of my plywood, and then with my 1/4 inch piece of mosaic and my 1/2 inch backer, that is about 3/4 inches. So I want the 1/8 plus the 3/4, and I knew that my pieces that were going to be sitting on the backer were about 1 inch tall. So I wanted my border even taller than that. So we're talking about 1 3/4 inches. And I like to give myself a little bit extra room. So this border came out to be 2 inches tall. I have another full tutorial on how I do the dados, but I love them very much because, like I mentioned earlier, it can cover up any imperfections that's on the edge of the backer and just keeps it a perfect, flawless, smooth finish. You want to give yourself a teeny bit of extra room in that dado, so when you go to slide it, especially after you have any finish on the backer, it doesn't get hung up. Ask me how many times I have muscled that backer on, or the border onto the backer, and you're like freaking out when the glue is already on there and it just won't go. At the same time, you don't want it to be too loose. You do want the glue to be able to clamp and adhere to the backer. You just want it to be like a little bit of extra room. When cutting the dados, I move my fence to 1/8 inch. Remember, I told you that's what I like on the underneath of the backer. And I will go ahead and cut that on each of the 4 borders. And then I will just slightly move my fence over a little bit. You don't want too much because you want the dado to cleanly cut. If you move it over too much, then it's gonna have like a little ridge on the inside. You could also get a dado blade, but like, who wants to be changing blades on the table saw? I'm just a girl. I'm not doing that. So I do it this way, and you just like inch, an inch, an inch, an inch, not even inch, like teeny tiny, itty bitty little moves over until your dado, which is the little pocket and groove in your backer or your border, is the same thickness as your backer. Most of the time you're going to be doing this on a square or a rectangle, so you will be cutting your borders at 45-degree angles to complete the rectangle, square. I was going to like come up with a fancy word, but that's the one I got. I use Collins clamps to hold the 2 pieces together at the corner, and on the other end, I will see where my backer ends. I will mark my line on my border. I will take that over to the miter saw, and I know that's exactly where I need to cut my other 45-degree angle to finish that side. You want to give yourself a little bit of extra room. Sometimes I cut them a little bit longer. That way I can inch them over, because you obviously cannot add wood back, but you can take it away to get the perfect size. Also, another tip here is your backer can take a little bit of like extra length of the border. Again, I just said you can't add more. So you would rather be like a teeny bit too long than a teeny bit too short. Especially on something this large, but you can do it on any size that you would like. I will be adding splines to my border. They help reinforce it and just keep it so strong where it's not going to pop off or move at any point. And you can get creative here with different species of wood that you put in the splines. Usually the splines, I've noticed, are a tad bit smaller than 1/4 inch. So I will either cut it on a table saw, or something else that I've learned to help me with these is I will take the same slats that I use on the mosaic. I usually have a ton laying around, and I will run them through my planer until I get them the exact thickness of the spline blade, because to me it hasn't been like a perfect number that I can just run through the table saw. So that's the best way that I found. You glue the splines in. You want to use extra glue to really get in there and hold that thing tight. Once that is dry, I will take my jigsaw again, or you could also pop it on your scroll saw and cut off those spline edges. Then you're gonna sand them smooth and finish the border just as you would any other time. Are you ready? I don't think you're ready. I don't think you're ready. All right. I love this step when things are finally coming together. You have worked so hard on it. Oh, I just sit back and admire it, all the hard work that I put into it, and we're almost to the finish line. It is looking beautiful, and now I'm gonna go finish it off. Like put the top coat on it, you know, finish it off. I'm gonna use my sandpaper and go over it one last time, but before I take it inside, I will blow it off with my air compressor that I have. I don't want any of the sawdust stuck in the grain when I go to finish the board. I will also wipe it down with a wet paper towel to get any of the excess sawdust. I don't want to change the color of the white oak very much, so I'm going to be using my General Finishes top coat. If you were to oil this with my Rubio that I like to use on, say, the walnut, it will yellow, orange, I don't know, it will deepen and richen that white oak color, but I wanted to keep it a little bit more of a neutral, so I'm going to be using this top coat. I apply it with the sponge over the majority of it, and then I will take a smaller paintbrush and get into the little grooves and pick up any of the excess top coat. You don't want to leave that on because it will haze. Like if you have it pulled in between each of the slats, it can haze or yellow or just get gunky in there. So you want it to be nice and smooth in between each slat. I'll usually do 2 to 3 coats of this, and I will let them dry for a few hours up to overnight in between each of them. That way I can go ahead and sand it down and it's not wet and tacky. So you want to sand it in between each of your coats to get any of the raised grain that comes up. You want to get that down. I use my laser to cut this cardboard template. At this point, I literally don't do any glue ups without a cardboard template. I don't trust myself, and it helps give me literal boundaries to know exactly where to glue, and I don't have to do any of the guessing myself. I have an entire YouTube video showing how to do this start to finish and break it down for you as well. I will measure it and make sure it's exactly in the center and use my masking tape to hold it down because we don't want that bad boy moving around and messing any of it up, especially at this point when we're almost to the end. The letters and the design of this are going to be out of MDF that I primed and I painted. I did not get the full glue up process on this one, but I used the E6000 super glue combo like I've done on all of my other signs. We're gonna let that dry overnight so we make sure nothing is moving. And voila, we have a 4x4 mosaic backer with this beautiful logo on it. I am so thankful that y'all choose to hang my pieces in your own small businesses. It is the sweetest thing and touches my heart. I cannot wait to see a picture of this one hung up in its home. For this size, I do hire out the packing of it all and I shipped it through UPS. It was barely small enough. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you for following along. Thank you for supporting me. You mean the world to me, and I'll see you on the next one.